And welcome back to the Miller's Edge here on the Tide 100.9, the home of Alabama sports. We're presented by our good friends at the Good Feet Store, America's arch support expert. Let's go to the Miller's Edge hotline. We'll bring in a big-time guest. Glad to have him on the show. Josh Pate, host of Late Kick Live. He's on CBS Sports HQ and 24/7 Sports. My man be breaking it down like it's hot. We'd love to have him on the program. Josh, hope you're doing well today, and thank you for being our guest.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be your guest. These are two names that I've known throughout my lifetime, both covering the sport and before I covered the sport, so I appreciate you having me on.
No doubt about it, man. We appreciate all the great work and what you accomplished. I'll tell you what, before we get to sports, what you said about where you were a couple of years back, sharing that story publicly and looking at where you are today resonated with me, being a minister and a pastor and having to go through some of that, making millions of dollars, losing money, falling into hardship, and understand resiliency and fight to get back up on your feet. And, sharing that, man, was really big. I can appreciate that. I know some people want to laugh and make jokes. And I read some things, but, man, I just want to say, man, thank you for doing that, because I think that helps people, especially in your industry that might be struggling or just any normal person. But I appreciate you being honest and really just exposing yourself out there to the public like that.
Well, I appreciate you saying it. And you being a minister, I think this will probably resonate with you, because I hear a lot of people say when things go wrong, well, that's okay, God has a plan, which is absolutely true. I used to make the mistake of telling myself when I kept screwing up that the outcomes of my screw-ups were, oh, that's just how God intended it to be. Well, that may not necessarily be the case. It may be the case that God has a plan for you, and you're getting in the way. And so it's kind of like a GPS system. I had someone brilliantly put it to me like this one day. You can take all the wrong turns you want to, but as soon as you decide you want to get your act together and go where you were originally supposed to go, that GPS will take you there. It'll plot you a course no matter where you are. And so, hey, Some of us do it at 18, some of us do it at 38, but as long as you eventually get back on that course, you'll make it.
No doubt about it.
Absolutely. Josh, we appreciate you joining, man. I just want to start off, what are your overall thoughts? I know you cover everybody nationally, but what are your overall thoughts on the SEC and in particular Alabama for this upcoming season? I know there's a lot of question marks surrounding Alabama, the quarterback position and other things, but, what's your outlook on the SEC for the 23 season?
Well, so here's what's interesting. I did not go to Alabama. I didn't play at Alabama, but for some reason I start taking it a little personal this time of year, because this is the time of year where everyone wants to doubt Nick Saban or doubt Alabama, and they're kind of poking and prodding and trying to find reasons to doubt because they've gotten so tired of the same program or same couple of programs winning, and they've actually got a lot of ammunition this year. I mean, there is legitimate doubt. You don't see Nick Saban take starting quarterback caliber transfers post-spring. That's not something any one of us are used to. And so I'm listening to that. And then I'm also watching, for example, a team like Florida State have a bunch of praise heaped on them, which I've got no problem with. They're doing really good things down there. I just always make sure, and I try and point out the hypocrisy, kind of blind hypocrisy in the A-B comparison game that people play in preview season. Because here's what I think. What I think is Bama gets held to the Bama standard in people's minds, and that is they don't compare Bama to the rest of the teams in the field. They compare them to past Bama teams. And it's not the way you should judge, folks. It's the same way Georgia's going to be handled from here on out. I take this Bama team right now, and I put Florida State jerseys on them. I think a bunch of folks who are doubting Bama would actually pick that Florida State team to win the national title, even though it's the exact same roster, just because of the warped perception people have in their own minds. But you look around, if you've got questions at quarterback at Alabama, that's okay. But don't stop the sentence there. Talk to me about Georgia. Talk to me about Ohio State. Talk to me about Clemson. Talk to me about a number of these places where that logo is usually in the tier one picture, and talk to me about the questions there too. If people want to have that conversation, I'm happy to have it.
That's good stuff. You're right about that. I mean, they are held at a different standard, and maybe it's fatigue, maybe it's just folks just don't like Nick Saban. Of course, Kirk Herbstreit does. He actually picked Alabama to win the national championship. I was a little bit taken aback by that because they do have a lot of questions, and we know they have recruited well, and they hadn't finished at one in recruiting. If you buy and all of that, they've been in the top 5, so you know somebody's gonna come from the ashes. Josh, that being said, across the SEC other side, Georgia, you were talking about Georgia. And I asked folks on my Twitter, like, what question would you let me? I had about 10 responses. Ask him about what's happening at Georgia. And I was kind of jokingly reading one day about all the traffic citations, and I think the AJC put out a story, all these citations. We know what happened last year, the fatal accident. Our hearts go out to them about that. But has Kirby allowed certain things to happen in this program? Because there are a lot of guys getting in some trouble, and they're having some issues.
I think they were loose with some things. I think they have been. I've talked to a bunch of folks over there. Went over there and spent a couple of days inside the program last year because I don't want to take people's word for anything that serious. I want to get my own impression. And so what I think, the feel that I get is there was a realization. I think it really hit home when they had the fatal accident there in January. But I think there was already a realization before the AJC ever said anything about it publicly that they needed to, right the ship a little bit internally. Well, the problem there is reporting, if it's done right, takes time. And that's a good thing. But the bad part of that is that means details come out sometimes months or years after the fact. Well, it could very well be that you've already course corrected months ago, and then details from years ago come out, and then people start banging on you and criticizing you and saying you need to change this and that without ever really knowing internally, hey, we already self-scouted ourselves. We already knew this about ourselves. Now, that's one possibility. That happens to be the feel I get from them. But there is another course that we could be going here, and that is, folks forget Kirby Smart's still a young head coach. I was listening to him talk the other day, and sometimes people forget. It used to be that you spent time at multiple places, Toledo or Bowling Green or whatnot, before you ever got a shot at a Georgia or an Ohio State or an Oklahoma. And the reason I mentioned those last 3 is because that's not the way it is anymore. Kirby's first stop is Georgia. Ryan Day's first stop is Ohio State. Lincoln Riley's first stop is Oklahoma. And in some cases, you cannot microwave yourself to understanding how to run an organization. You're just going to learn the lessons the hard way, and you're going to make the mistakes on the biggest platform that the sport has to offer in front of millions of people. And a lot of folks are shocked that maybe Kirby Smart's going through that. And I look at it and I say, I'm surprised it hasn't happened more frequently with him or Ryan Day or Lincoln Riley. So this stuff right here, if you go ask Nick Saban, when he is a young head coach at a MAC school, how many mistakes were you making? How many mistakes were you making at Michigan State? He'd probably had you a laundry list. He could roll a Dead Sea Scroll out that'd go down the hallway. But the difference is you don't know about that because no one's watching it. They're watching Kirby now. And but then when I talk about that, folks know I grew up in Georgia. And so it's really hard for me to even talk about that on the national level without people just thinking that I'm carrying the water for the University of Georgia. So it's a tightrope walk for everyone right now.
No, and I think you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, people have to understand, too. I mean, these head coaches, they do their best, but you can't control what guys do around the clock. And I think we see that at other programs, but like you said, when you have all the lights on you, when you're back-to-back national championships or champions, people are going to put you under a microscope. And that's the reality of things. And like I said, I mean, these young guys, man, when you're having success, you're being put up on a pedestal in your community. It's easy for you to be a little hard-headed and make, some rash, dumb decisions. But again, these guys are young. But I think you said it perfectly. I want to segue back real quick to the Alabama quarterback battle that's going on right now. They just brought in a guy in Tyler Buckner, and one of our listeners was asking, do you think that he really can win this quarterback job from what you've seen? Now, I think he's in a similar boat as the other guys where they've shown some promise, but just not concrete evidence to really label them as the guy as of yet. But how do you see that playing out? Do you see Alabama starting off with a guy like Jalen Milroe, who filled in for Bryce Young last season, showed some promise, but also had some areas that he needed to improve upon? Or do you see them going with a young guy like Ty Simpson, who has some potential, but still is not perfect by any means? How do you just see that quarterback race playing out for Alabama?
I really think if you got if you got truth serum in that coaching staff, I think they'd tell you they thought Ty Simpson was going to win the job in the spring. And turnovers really prevented him from doing that. And then they make the decision they make to bring in Buckner. What I think is this, Christian, you've been in a locker room with Nick Saban coach team, and you've been around some of those teams where there were quarterback battles. You know, as well as anyone, probably better than anyone, there comes a point where the locker room will tell you who's winning the job. And I really think if this is even close to equal, I think it's Milroe's job, because I think Milroe probably has that locker room more so than anyone. I think folks look to him in that locker room and respect him more so than anyone. If you're going to tie your hopes to one horse in that locker room, I think a majority of that team would look at Jalen Milroe as being that guy. Having said that, if he doesn't win the job, if someone definitively takes the job from him, then all that's a moot point. I don't ever remember going into the summer with a quarterback situation that looks like this at Alabama. That doesn't mean they can't win at all. It just means it's a different kind of formula going into fall camp.
I agree with you. Josh Pate is our guest here, host of Late Kick Live, one of the new stars in the business, CBS Sports HQ, 24/7 Sports. And, I was looking at a video you did, and you've been preaching the same gospel I've been saying about Alabama. And it's that, last year was a struggle, 2 losses. We had Barrett Sallee on just the other day. He think they're going to lose to LSU at home and Texas at home. This team hasn't been the same, hasn't looked the same. We've been talking a lot about the standard, the Bama standard. I've been saying they haven't looked like the Nick Saban coach teams that I've seen in the past. The discipline problems, the jumping off sides, the mental errors, no really alpha dog, just leadership. I've seen things that just didn't look right. You were saying that. I've seen a video of you saying that. You still feeling that same way, or do you feel like a guy like Kevin Steele that knows what Nick wants defensively, knows the attitude he wants, and a guy like Tommy Rees coming over from Notre Dame, tight end room, physical offensive line play, running the football? Do you think those two coordinators are going to change somewhat of the identity of Alabama?
I definitely think Steele knows what Nick Saban wants. Now, whether he gets it out of that unit is a different story. But look, this is the same at all level of competition. Like I'm playing pickup softball the other night, and we're down by 4, and I got a kid in our dugout yelling, "Come on, guys, just need 5." No, we need to score about 40. That's what we need to do. It's not do just enough to win. It's do as much as you possibly can, and then rest your starters in the fourth quarter. That's what Bama football was, and that's what when you're playing to your competition instead of playing to a standard, that's what it looks like. You constantly got an eye on the scoreboard. You're happy when you do just enough. That's why all of a sudden you got a bunch of one-possession games instead of dog walks in the fourth quarter, but you've got the same caliber roster. Their recruiting hasn't fallen off. It's not the caliber of athlete. I know they made an adjustment in strength and conditioning, and that's its own show, but they have not lacked. They've out-talented everyone they've been on the field with, and that includes Georgia in those games, just not by a wide margin. It's a mentality thing. It's much more a neck-up thing. And that's why I'm really fascinated with the coordinators that he brought in, because I think Nick Saban honestly looks around and says, there are 30 people each side of the ball out there that if they do things the way I tell them to, we'll dominate with, because it's not so much about the coordinator. I'm giving them the best players in the country to work with. It's about working with them the right way. It's about putting the right mentality on the field and having the right folks on the field with that mentality. That's what you'll look for. It's not about X's and O's to me as much as it is just about pulling a different level dog out of each player. And if you do that, they'll look exactly like they had looked.
Josh, I think you might need to go into coaching, man. You're spot on with that. You're saying everything that we've been saying, man. You know your stuff. That's exactly what we've been saying. So I'm glad you were backing up everything that we've been saying in terms of the mentality thing. You're right. The talent is there. It's not going. If anything, Alabama has more talent than they had in years prior when they've won before. But you're right. There's something that's been lacking from the neck. I love the way you worded that. You're spot on. I know we're running against the time, but I want to ask you, the SEC finally unveiled their plans for the 24 season with the additions of Oklahoma and Texas. They opted for the 8 games instead of 9 games within the SEC, and they're going divisionless. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not shocked by it. And what I don't think the SEC is going to be impacted at all by criticism from outside the SEC. You got a bunch of folks in conferences where they play 9 games that are trying to call you soft And I look at it and I say, look, I mean, there are 8-game conference schedules in the SEC next year that would be rougher than 10-game conference schedules in some other parts of the country. Not all, but in some other parts of the country. This is not the NFL. In the NFL, you can go 9-7, 10-6, and whether you go 13-3, 14-2, or whatever, you're all going to be in the playoffs. Losses mean so much more in college football, to where you rack up 2 of them. No one really cares about your strength of schedule in December, and that's why I'm not in such a hurry to beef up a schedule to appease a crowd that's just going to eliminate me over a 12-0 Boise State 3 months from now, simply because their record is better.
Man, Josh, listen, brother, we can do another hour with you,
man. Yeah, we can.
We appreciate the love, brother. We appreciate all the great analysis. One of the best there is. I hope we can continue to have you on our program and build this relationship. It's excellent. Thank you so much, brother.
I appreciate you guys having me. I would be glad to come on anytime.
Yeah,
all right,
you go,
Josh Pate,
tell everybody how they can find you and keep up with you.
I'll search Late Kick with Josh Pate. Pretty much any platform you like, podcast, YouTube. You search Late Kick, something will pop up.
Yes, sir.
All good, my brother.
Man.
God bless you, man. Let's talk soon.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Josh Pate, so much good stuff there. We got to get out of here. Christian Miller, Corey Miller. This has been the Miller's Edge.